Welcome to the FounderVideo podcast, an interview series bringing you the latest and greatest info on B2B marketing, revenue operations, and go-to-market strategy from respected experts. Here is your host, Will Martin.
All right, so we're here for the 19th episode of the FounderVideo podcast. Today we have Elio Narciso, founder and CEO of Scalestack. We're going to learn more about the tool, talk about GTM, his background, how the tool compares to Clay, and more. So yeah, first off, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Will. It's great to be here and nice to meet you. Yes, we've just met and I think it's great. And I love that we are rolling. But yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So let's start with kind of like your background. You spent a few years building up and managing the AWS Global Startup Program. And that was a previous experience, if I'm not mistaken, to founding Scalestack. How that experience kind of shaped or led you to founding Scalestack, and what did you learn there about enterprise tech startups, go to market, that led you to build this tool?
Yeah, so I spent almost 5 years at Amazon before Scalestack. And before that, I've been starting and building companies for a while. So that was an unusual experience for me. I didn't have an immediate new idea. And I've always been curious about Amazon and their leadership principles. I'd implemented some of Amazon's leadership principles at some prior companies that I'd started. And after we sold the company, I didn't have any immediate new idea, and I wanted to see what could be accomplished in such a large organization. I hadn't had a boss in like 10 years, but they made me this like super interesting offer. Basically this was 2017, 2018, they were in need of building better relationships with startups, particularly mid to late stage. So not the earlier stage startups that just starting, but companies that have already raised like maybe Series A or Series B and are on their like track to fast growth. And essentially Amazon realized that Microsoft could offer to these startups, the B2B relationships that they have with hundreds of thousands of companies to accelerate their go-to-market. Google Cloud could offer maybe like incentives in the form of like advertising, and Amazon needed to do more. And so they had this problem identified, and they wanted to build a team with people that were experienced in the startup world and that knew the space and knew how to build and grow companies so that they could be credible with other founders in like supporting their go-to-market. And so I joined in early 2018 as a senior BD leader, and we built a small but mean team worldwide to support these mid to late stage startups. At the time, there was no program, but only like this small team. And so after more or less the first year, I proposed to build a program to fully support with more resources, more people, more money, these really amazing startups that were part of the AWS ecosystem. And so I don't know if you've read about Amazon, but they have a huge writing culture. And so I wrote a doc explaining what I wanted to do. This is in the form of a narrative, 6 pages, or what's called the PR FAQ. So like you write like a press release, which is fake, but it's like the press release that you are going to launch if the program or the product gets approved. And so I wrote one of those, and people liked it, and it went up to Andy Jassy, which at the time was the CEO of AWS and now is the CEO of Amazon. And he liked it and he approved it. And so we launched the AWS Global Startup Program, I think in 2019 or something like that. Yeah, the end of 2019, early 2020. And now, I mean, like when it's a program that still exists, so it's sort of my legacy there. By the time I left to fully focus on Scalestack, we had 600 startups under management and really successful companies like Notion, Webflow, Foursquare, and many others. And so that was something cool that I did while there, and fun. And also it was great to meet and support like amazing founders. But also going back to your original question, it impacted a lot about what we're doing at Skillstack, because over and over in supporting these startups, we realized like two things. The first is that reps were very inefficient. Sales reps at these companies had huge pockets of unproductive work, which related to making sense of data, in the form of like target accounts or leads. And, I don't know, I've read, I don't know how many prospecting docs from these startups that we were supporting. And these prospecting docs, which are documents that you write to support and help the sales rep in what they need to do, invariably would say, hey, go on Crunchbase and research companies, and then like go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator and find out about profiles and titles, and then go on ZoomInfo or Apollo or Lucia to find contact details, and then start the outreach process for like outbound motions. Of course, for inbound motions, it was like, okay, once we get the lead, like go check like for like which company they work at and how big is that company and what's their title. And that's like very inefficient. And the inefficiency is what we wanted to solve and why we started Scalestack. And so while I've been in BD sales partnership roles all my career, and so the problem is very familiar to me directly, it was like this incredible laboratory, if you want, of like mid to late stage startups that we were supporting at AWS through the program that like convinced me that something needed to be done, and why I started Scalestack.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely super interesting. I guess I wanted to know more as well about how that startup program was helping those 600 companies, and how you, if you want to talk a little bit more in detail, about those sales problems that they were having and how they were all pretty much really the same, and how that led you to founding ScaleStack. Because, I guess in terms of the involvement that the AWS Global Startup Program had, that led you to know more details about the problems that those companies were having, and that ultimately led to founding ScaleStack. So I'm curious to know there.
Yeah, so the program is, and I've left Amazon a couple of years ago, so I'm sure it has evolved, and I'm close to several people on the team, of course. But the way the program was back then, it was helping companies in like three big areas, which was the co-marketing, co-selling, and joint development with AWS. So the idea was, how can AWS deploy resources to help and support these companies in their go-to-market? But at the end of the day, what most of these companies wanted was like more leads, more introductions, and more help from the entire AWS sales org, which is very big, to support their go-to-market. But a lot of the problems that I saw that we were solving for these companies were part of like a broader set of issues that these companies had in their own go-to-market. And one big area, as mentioned briefly, was these reps had to spend, I don't know, 70% of their time wrangling data, handling data from Crunchbase or LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Apollo, Lucia, and so forth. And so if you think about the value and the cost of a sales rep and having them spend 60-70% of their time putting data into the CRM and understanding who their targets are, understanding if like a lead is good and they should focus or not, kind of sounds like a waste of time. I mean, it's an important motion that like you need to do, but probably the rep is not the best person to do this. And and these are like actual stats. Like Salesforce did a study last year. They interviewed 8,000 reps and they asked them, what do you do all day? And literally the number was, in 72% of my time on average, I don't spend selling. Only 28% of my time is spent selling. The rest is researching the prospects and the companies and like putting data somewhere from somewhere else. And so this was a big area of problem that we identified. The second area, which is sort of like related, a cause maybe or a symptom, but like if you ask any B2B company today, are you happy with the quality of the data in your CRM? The answer is like typically no. And so low quality of data leads to reps needing to supplement that with like manual research or better understanding of the leads that come in, or maybe of the prospect that they need to target and outreach to. And that's exactly where Scalestack is focused on, in increasing the efficiency of the overall sales and marketing processes by orchestrating data automatically without like manual involvement from reps at large scale, and with automated processes which are fast by nature, and maybe increasingly so using AI to clean the data, normalize it, synthesize it, and make it better. And that's what we are focusing on, and like those are the problems that we're solving.
That's awesome. That's actually a crazy stat from Salesforce. 72% of the time spent from sales reps is not selling, is dealing with data. That's insane. That just
Yeah.
doesn't add up. Well, it adds up because then if you look at the numbers and how inefficient sales orgs are becoming today, that tells you a lot. Like it goes to show, like of course they would spend most of their time not selling. That's why they're so inefficient, right? Because they need to deal with all this data. And I saw you just dropped that
Yeah,
slide
I
in the
dropped the link
chat.
there so you can
Yeah.
watch it in your own time. But I mean, the other aspect of this is that like until a couple of years ago, 2020, 2021, the way to grow for companies, given that this is the efficiency that they have to handle, was, well, we have a lot of capital, so we can invest in hiring more people. But now the world is completely different, and companies don't have the option to, hey, let's hire like 50 more reps or 100. Most companies. And so
Totally.
they need to find the route to higher efficiency by automating a lot of the stuff that is done manually, and by like essentially flipping that equation on its head, which is really our like main goal. We want to flip that 70-30 on its head, um, which is like, hey, maybe they should spend 70% of the time selling and only 30 understanding data, but not creating the data. Because like the problem is that they spend so much time because they have to create the data. But if you do need to spend some time reading the data, absorbing the insights and all of that, because that's valuable. You cannot show up to a customer call and not knowing everything about like who the customer is, right? So the rep needs to spend time, understand that, but that cannot be the majority of your time.
Totally not. That's awesome. So you've seen many different, well, not that different, I guess, because they were all having most of the same problems, right? But you've seen many go-to-market motions at various, like a lot of companies. And you also briefly mentioned before, of course, that you have, like you founded two companies in the past already, both of them exits, successful ones, of course. Then in regarding that, like I wanted to ask you as well, how did your go-to-market strategy work back in those two companies, Mobave and Zero Nine? And were you having the same problems that you identified in those companies? Like, would having Scalestack helped you grow those companies faster, I guess?
Mobev certainly, because Mobev targeted like marketeers, so marketing and advertising teams within large companies as well as like agencies, and so the ability to identify targets and prospects efficiently would have certainly helped. 09 less so, because it was a B2C company. This was a ringtone company, but we were selling to large telecom operators and media companies. In that case, I mean, Scalestack really works well if you have like a wide addressable market. So like if you can sell to many companies and many people, like the ability to know who to sell into first is very important. So you need to know like how to prioritize your targets. If you only have like a handful of named accounts, it's the rep should really know their 5 accounts, but if the rep has 100, 200 accounts, it cannot sit in her head or his head. And so like you need something to automate all of this data orchestration stuff. I also had like one company that like started and we weren't able to sell, and we learned a ton there. We would have certainly benefited from Scalestack back then, so much that like the learning from that company were translated into Scalestack. And I founded Scalestack with one of the product managers at that company because we hit so many roadblocks in identifying our ideal customer profile and powering the ideal customer profile that we had in terms of like target account list and companies that we wanted to target, that we became pretty good at it. And so sort of like pivoted the company into this.
Okay, so Scalestack is a pivot from
It's
another
not really, it's a
company.
different company. But the problem, it was born out of like the necessity at the other company, which, was a completely different play. We had developed a sensor that you could plug into retail stores, and it would sense how many people are in the store and how people are moving. Is the storefront window converting? That was certainly like a great experience to handle a ton of data. So we learned how to handle like analytics at large scale, how to use AI. It was super early to use AI, but we did anyway. We would send recommendations to the store owner or managers. It was a fantastic product, but it had the wrong target because it targeted physical retailers, which, I have friends in the physical retail space, but it's really hard for them to buy new technology. But at that company, Alex, my co-founder, who was a product manager there and then grew to become like my right-hand person, really, and now we decided to start Scalestack together. We had to test lots of different ICPs for that company. Okay, retail is like really tough. Let's test like, I don't know, outdoor media, and then let's test like prop tech, and let's test pockets of opportunities. And we tried many, but it was very hard to generate those target account lists. And sort of like we became like enamored with the problem of like doing that and decided to focus on it. Plus there was then like the example and experience at Amazon and the program and the learning from these companies that were facing similar problems, like, we want to target a new type of customer, and can AWS help us penetrate that? And it was first and foremost a data problem.
Yeah, it's just to summarize that then, if I'm getting it correctly, the fundamental issue there is that in order to make a go-to-market function work, the first thing you need to do is build a list or build an account target account list, or like a TAM, basically. Like, what market are you going to focus on? Where is the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 accounts? And in every time you want to test a new positioning, a new messaging, a new channel, everything, that's the first step that you need to get done. And if you don't have that step, like that first step streamlined, the more time you take and the more tedious that process is, the less likely your go-to-market function is to succeed, right? And therefore, like, if you can, you guys did it with Scalestack, you're productizing that process in a way so that sales reps, RevOps, go-to-market teams, organizations at the end of the day can spend more
Yeah.
time going to market, selling, talking to the customer, because that process of dealing with data and pulling from a bunch of different data providers is done, right? So in order to get deeper into that, I know that one of the pillars of the tool is the Universal API, which kind of like challenges having to stitch a bunch of different tools together with your own time and work. How does it work, and why is it such a game changer? How can it contribute to CRM hygiene, etc.? Like, what are the use cases, etc.?
So first of all, like you put it perfectly in terms of like the definition of the TAM. Um, at a high level, there are like two main motions in go to market. One is the outbound motions where like you go out and reach out customers. And you have a number of ways, from email to calls to LinkedIn messages to even marketing campaigns. So like you seek to bring like the message out to people. The other motion is inbound, where like people come to you and want to talk to you, and they send you an email, they fill a form or something. We offer a solution for both of these motions, which at the end of the day is about data. And so the TAM reference that you made is, for instance, like priority number one for our customer MongoDB. They need to understand the TAM in each account, and then for all of the accounts. And they have hundreds of thousands, of course, because they can sell to pretty much any company that has developers, and we love them. And so TAM is like really important. And how do you define TAM? TAM is a combination of maybe how many developers, but also what's the size of that company, and what's the revenue, or what's the funding, or how much are they spending on cloud. So these are all data points, right? And these are all data points that come from different places. There is no one single data source. There is many data sources. And we think that like by mixing and matching data sources with specific attributes that you can power with those data sources, by orchestrating all of this data, you end up with a data set which is your own, based on your ICP. And that's where we help companies on. So like for their ICP, their attributes, at the scale they need in every territory, we compose this target TAM list and account list, all enrich, all prioritize. We can power like inbound flows so that you have a lot of leads. And so we tell you like, which go-to-market motion should you activate depending on the quality, quote unquote, of the lead, meaning like how well is matched to your ideal customer profile. And so that was like first part about like what you just said about the TAM, which is very right for a specific set of like motions. With regards to the universal API, I think that to build Scalestack is not a point solution. It's not something that like I say, hey, let's give this to the rep. That's not the idea of Scalestack. It's a very comprehensive platform. We make it as easy to use for the customer, but we had to develop a universal API to like connect lots of different data sources, with API keys or like ad hoc integrations, or maybe like ingesting CSV files or getting data from Salesforce or HubSpot or Typeform or whatever it is, right? And that's one component. The other component is the workflow builder, which is like essentially a low-code app for which you can compose the data architecture almost like if it's a Figma file. Like in Figma, you create boxes and you create your own design and stuff. That's what our platform does. But each box, it's a module, and each module performs a data function, which is maybe get some data from LinkedIn and clean that data and associate it to the right account. And maybe another module that does like, hey, this is, an account which is the parent of other accounts, which are children of that account. So like, Microsoft in Seattle is like, parent, and then there is like Microsoft Germany or Italy or whatever, right? And those are child account. And so we use component of the platform to define that logic or to synthesize the data. Like, hey, we absorb the company description and the output is this a B2B or B2C company? And properly categorizing your targets by B2C or B2B, it's an important element for many of our customers. And so universal API, workflow builder, and then the output are typically business apps that people have, like the CRM or I don't know, Outreach or Salesloft. But increasingly with AI, there is going to be co-pilots or agents that want to perform things, but they need good data. And so we have seen a lot of like AI SDRs coming to market. Those SDRs, we can open a can of worms there, like about like if people really like to receive emails from AI. But having said that, I think that these AI driven or powered apps, number one thing that they need is good data. If you feed to this agents, copilots, apps, bad data about your target accounts or leads or the insights that you've gathered about them, the results are going to be a disaster no matter what. And so the architecture is the platform that we have developed, which is not one thing, but it's many different components.
That's awesome. I love the part of the workflow builder, the fact that every box is a module, and every module, like you explained it perfectly, every module performs a data function, and it doesn't need to be only one data function. It's like a module can include like pull the data, clean it, associate it to the right account, and combine many boxes, and there you go. Like
Yeah.
that's how you can automate the entire list building process.
And then do that very efficiently, because I mean, like depending on like what you're learning about that account or lead, you may decide that it's not worth enriching anymore, because like it's a company that is not really in target. But if you start discovering things that make that account interesting, you keep going. And so like the waterfall or the workflow that we build, like it has like trigger points. They say, okay, this is interesting, let's do some more, let's connect Crunchbase, let's go look for like cloud spend. But we only do that, hence we consume data, if it makes sense, if like the account has like some signals that tells us that it's an interesting company or it's an interesting lead.
This podcast is brought to you by FounderVideo. We'll cut your LinkedIn ads costs by at least 50% with natural-looking creatives that prospects actually want to consume. Just have an expert in your C-suite show up to a 90-minute interview once a month and let us take care of the rest. Turn LinkedIn ads from an accepted line item expense into a scalable revenue channel that fits into your go-to-market strategy. Book a free consultation at foundervideo.io.
Exactly. So in a way, this is powering as well, not only signal-based selling, but efficient signal-based selling and effective without having to eat up a ton of time from a sales rep, which is like insane.
Time, I mean, like the goal is that like all of this is performed by the platform and not by like the rep. I would say consumption of data, because data costs money, but also time that like people have to spend in like reading the data. No, so if you have a list of like 200 accounts, then you only enrich those full-fledged that like show like a lot of promise. So in that sense, yes, it can impact also the time that the rep has to spend.
Totally. So let's talk about how Scalestack compares to other tools. Would you say there's something like Scalestack out there that can, I mean, first thing that comes to mind, I think, is Clay, right? The fact that you can, you mentioned waterfall, and when I hear waterfall enrichment, the first thing I think about is Clay, of course. And part of, if there's one tool that people are using to automate or productize or speed up the list building process and connect a lot of data vendors and have that sort of universal API, it's Clay, right? But Clay has a huge barrier of entry, which is the fact that it's like there's a big learning curve that a lot of people don't go through, and that kind of like makes adoption harder. I like their pricing model though; it's usage based, so I think that's good. It's aligned with how people use it, and it's really powerful. But again, adoption, it's not a problem. I would say it could be a problem, and a lot of people don't know how to make the most out of it. How does Scalestack compare to Clay? What are the key differences? I know, one could say that they're aiming to solve the same problems, but maybe have a different approach. What would you say to that?
Yeah. First off, when I was at Amazon, they, like Amazon tells you, let's obsess about customers and not competitors. So like the obsession is really about like doing something that it's valuable for the customer. And if you spend too much time on competitors, that's like probably a waste of time, because like competitors will do what they want to do. And so I want to premise that with this idea. But having said that, I think across the board, the desire for companies to better leverage data to inform, and drive RevOps decisions is very hot in many companies, and small, large, you name it. So it's there because of the efficiency issue the 70/30, because like the fact that companies cannot hire their way out of this problem, because of AI that represents like immense opportunity. So I think that the problem is clear. People want to solve it, and it's hot in that sense. And Clay has done a phenomenal job. I mean, they raised a ton of money this summer, and they've done a phenomenal job letting smaller companies and individual contributors understand that they have to solve this problem. Now, we are very different, because if I had to like summarize it, we are the Clay for the enterprise in a nutshell. An enterprise is basically for us a company that has, I don't know, at least 30, 40 people in sales and marketing. They have like wide addressable market. They have meaningful motions. They have a couple of like people in RevOps that want to solve this for the entire org and so forth. Our hypothesis is that Clay works well, as you said, right? Like if you are like an individual contributor with some technical expertise that enjoys the actual act of like wrangling data and connecting stuff and generating like spreadsheets and workflows on their own. But the assumption for us is that larger companies, number one, want to act at the org level. So imagine like one of our customers, MongoDB. They have thousands of reps. They cannot have like 1,000 different versions of the orchestration of the data. They have to have like one model or several models, depending on the customer segment and depending on what they want to do, that then like trickles down to everyone. And so this is number one, org level orchestration that like trickles down to the reps or SDRs. The second is that you could use Clay to do larger like scale enrichment, but it's really like time spent wrangling data. So like the RevOps team and SalesOps teams that want to use Clay have to spend a lot of time creating the data and generating that data. Our hypothesis is that like if you use Scalestack as a RevOps leader, SalesOps leader, you basically take this off of your plate. You don't have to wrangle basic data. You don't have to like create this data. But what you can do is receiving this data, well enriched, well clean, well prioritized, and build products or business apps on top of this data. So we have basically like managed the entire data enrichment process at scale, securely. We're SOC 2 compliant, so because the enterprises that we work with need that. But it's not just the scale. It's not just about the automation. It's not just that we can integrate any data source, but it's like don't spend time wrangling basic data. Just set it and forget it, and we'll handle the complexity based on what you tell us. And then the other aspect is there is a lot of companies with a lot of different custom data points. We are able to generate data for any data points that you need. And so it doesn't need to be pre-configured, preset. Do you need a data point that is unique to you? We'll create a module, we'll deploy a module that like does that for you automatically without like using, people or analysts. But like the module will be deployed, and like if the data exists somewhere, we'll go and get it and bring it back in the orchestration. So hopefully that's clarifies some of the differences.
It definitely
with
does. I
Clay.
think you put it. I love the difference that you made, as in, Clay is for individual contributors, and for people to use manually. At the end of the day, if you want to make the most out of Clay, you got to spend time using it, right? And that involves not only technical expertise but time and complexity that cannot be scaled and that cannot be adopted by a 40-person marketing team or a 50-person sales organization, right? Of course, like, it wouldn't work that much for enterprise. Hence why a lot of the adoption from Clay, it's either from individual contributors, and most importantly as well, we're seeing a lot of Clay agencies pop up, right? That, we'll talk about that later. But for what you said right there about the data points, right, that you can find everywhere and like deploy a module, and if that data exists somewhere, we'll get it to you. Can you give me examples of like data points that customers have asked for without whatever you can reveal, but like not strange, but like data points that most people wouldn't think of adding to a Clay table, for example, right? And that could be added in a module in Scalestack, and that exists somewhere. And what is that somewhere as well? I'm curious.
Yeah, so well, it can be like skills of a developer. So you want to know how many developers a company has, and that's relatively simple, right? But then you want to know maybe how many developers with a specific skill set you can find in that. Maybe cloud skills or MongoDB skills, or maybe those there are more DevOps versus like people that actually write code. And so you have to go deeper into like understanding who those developers are. Or like I don't know, we had customers that like asked us to like, hey, our reps use a lot of screenshots of our target customers or prospects website because they put that in the email, in the outbound email. But the act of going into the website, take a screenshot, bring it back, just that, it's maybe you've lost 3 minutes. I don't know, whatever it is, right? 2 minutes. And so like these are just like examples, but I have many like it. And also the triangulation of data points, so that like the triangulation of, for instance, IP addresses for downloads of apps, cross-reference with people that come to your website, and then indicating if like is the same person, and then is that a lead that like is interested and that has downloaded your app. So you can do a lot of stuff with if you know where to find that data, and if you know how to cross-reference data with each other, right? And so that's what we do best. And plus, people have ideas, right, about this stuff. And when I showed like our workflows to our target customers and prospects and RevOps leaders, like the workflow like sort of makes sense logically for them. Yeah, this is we can do account enrichment and like lead enrichment, but let's say like you want to do account enrichment. So this is the data waterfall that I was telling you about. And like so we can import data from your CRM across all of the different like attributes that you care, add like LinkedIn data, but then clean the data, consolidate the data, have like a decision module, are we happy about that or not? And then like maybe we add data from the target customer or prospect like website, and so we go to the career page and about us, and we add data, we match it with the LinkedIn, and then maybe we have to properly categorize like the data by territory. And so what I was saying, in each of these modules, we do like perform data functions, maybe sometimes leveraging AI. In this case, like I want to associate, we leverage like OpenAI or Claude or any of the LLMs that exist. But like is the prompt engineering that is very important here to properly associate the right data point to the right territory, which is usually stuff that people do manually or sort of, or maybe with analysts or agencies. We do this for them automatically. We normalize the sub-industry. Maybe you can add like Crunchbase data and like, and so on. And then, at the end of all of this, once we have enriched all of the data, we score everything. And the scoring is like really sophisticated because you can basically score any data point based on any model that you want to use. And then like once it's scored, we can generate those target account lists in each territory, in each like patch, in each, reps, and distribute that across the org without the rep or the individual contributor having to do anything. And so that's the power of what we're doing.
That's in. I'm just amazed. That's crazy. How do you? Okay, so let's talk now. I'm seeing why there's an argument that you can make about how agencies can become a burden, or just agencies that do this type of work, right? Because at the org level, especially for enterprise, having this as a product is just beyond, like, there's nothing that can beat it, right? If it can be done automatically, there's no agency that can beat it. Even if they claim they have special databases or like super good IP and know-how and whatever, that's awesome for sure, and there's still business for that. But at the end of the day, if you can afford a tool like this, so I don't know, by pricing, we can talk about that as well if you want to, but it's nothing that can beat it. So why do you make the argument that agencies can become or are becoming a burden, and how? Well, we know how Scalestack can fix it, but why do you think that is? Because I read an article in your guys' blog that talks about this, and yeah, like, what's the argument there? How have you seen it, if you've seen it?
I mean, again, like I don't want to like focusing too much on competitors is usually not healthy. I really want to focus on customers, and like I think that number one, we serve different customers. I mean, like I assume that for a smaller company and like an individual contributors that want to experiment and hack their way out of the problem, and they have like the right time or the time to spend on this, it's a fine solution. But we are focusing, because that's what we know best, is larger companies that have like larger sales and marketing teams, and like those companies have like really specific needs at the scale that they need to solve for, and they need to do this with a level of security, a level of customization that like can be solved by our platform. And so I think that the clay agencies are like a natural evolution of a product that needs, like some understanding. And so these guys have done it like many times, and so they can help other customers use it. But we want to be like, the product for the enterprise, and we want to be like, a solution that you set and forget in many ways, because of the power of all of the workflow builder, the automation that you build, and the ability to like, customize at the edge, for instance, the scoring or the data points. And we are building, and there is going to be like a lot of new launches that we're going to do between now and the end of the year. But we're building lots of technology in order to really make it easier for companies to transfer, even in verbal or natural language inputs, what they want to do. And we are like the ones that automate the building of the workflow with LLMs, so that people don't have to. We don't want people spending their time on wrangling basic data. When like you have the the AirPod cable, like that, like it all gets tangled, and like you have to untangle and you wrangle your way out of that. That's what I feel that when you had to handle like so many different data, that, yes, I can solve it, I can like not the AirPod cable, but it's like so boring. And so that's how like I see people wrangling like data at the basic level. We don't want them to do that. We want to, basically automate all of that, so that once they get like the data, enriched, clean, and ready for AI, very important, then they can do a lot of different things. And we have seen this evolution at customers that we serve. Like the RevOps teams used to be concerned with data quality before Scalestack. And they would tell us, oh, I need to enrich the data about like 10,000 accounts is wrong. I need to enrich it. The sales team is coming to me and is pinging me on Slack and say like, this data is wrong. That data point is not right. And then like after Scalestack, everything went quiet and there were no more complaints about the data quality, so much that the RevOps teams could almost become like product managers. So we really want the RevOps, sales ops teams to become product managers in the sense that like, okay, now they have this great data set. So the problem is not like the data about my leads is wrong. How do I make it right? But is I have the right data about leads. How do I like use that data so that the reps, do a better job and go faster and roll out those campaigns like in a more effective way?
Uh, you mentioned the launches and what's coming and whatnot. So there was one thing that I thought about, one idea that you probably have thought about. Is there a world in which the workflow builder learns by itself with the input that you give it into the modules and
Yeah,
is able, because when you said set and forget it, I thought, well, actually, you might want to tweak the modules, you might want to
of
tweak
course,
the
of course.
scoring, you might want to tweak, of
Constantly,
course,
if
but
you want.
like exactly,
I mean,
you can do it
hey, let
as
me
much
let
as
me
you
think
can.
that constant in an enterprise, constantly it's dangerous. I mean, like you don't want to always change it, but like
Right.
enterprises used to do this once a year, like big planning phases. But like, I think that the idea of like use LLMs, tell me what you need, and it automatically builds the workflow is the direction where we're going. So, so
And
that it builds itself based on the inputs that maybe if I tell you like what are like your ideal customers and you will tell me type of customers, what type of companies and what type of people, all of those are things that an LLM can translate into data points and then maybe modules and then like custom modules and all of that.
can that LLM be trained on what are the best data sources as well to pick
Of
from?
course, of course. I think that that's part of our value, that we need to have a point of view. We have many data sources. I think that they do a phenomenal job in like gathering like the raw data and packaging it in each of their like um, segment. But we do need to have a point of view as an orchestration, and that can be expressed in like, okay, for this data point, this is the data source, or maybe a combination of two, or maybe like a triangulation of several. So absolutely.
And then can that LLM be trained to not only build the workflow for you, but optimize it ongoingly for you based on
On
the
what it
scoring
learns.
model that you created?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm seeing like better opening rates and better conversion rates, and people are like telling me X, Y, and Z. So absolutely. The feedback loop
And
is very important. And right now it's more like in batches. It will be done like, on a regular iterative process.
yeah, and ideally it pulls that data from your CRM, from your meetings, whatever,
Yeah.
and it can know ongoingly what conversion rates are up, whatever.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. So I mean, you're of course you thought about it. You guys are working on it, so future is bright on that end. Tell me about the AI Copilot of Scalestack and how I mean, I guess we've talked already, kind of ad nauseum already about how the platform works, and I think it's already made clear that it's super powerful. But like you mentioned, AI Copilot briefly throughout the episode, and I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to touch on regarding that. Like, is there anything specific?
Yeah. So I think that one of the workflows that we have launched for some of our customers get, closer to like what's considered a co-pilot. So the way I see this is, like Apple has the App Store, and they also launched the weather app, the Apple Maps, and like the Garage Band app, several apps. But those are a very, very, very tiny fraction of all of the apps that exist in the App Store. And 99.9999% of those apps are not made by Apple. But Apple powers the App Store. And so the Copilot that we launch and some of our customers are using, for us is sort of like a reference app that showcases what you can do if you have well orchestrated data. It is important. We want that app to succeed and like that Copilot to become better and better over time. But we are really focused on the App Store, and the equivalent of the App Store for us is the orchestration platform. So that's where we are putting the majority of the efforts and the focus. While we want the Copilot to be really good, and I think it can be really good in specific situations where we can work collaboratively with the customer and have the Copilot learn from a lot of different data points and the feedback loop, and maybe there is lots of different type of reps you can support. For sure, it can be very powerful and successful, but it is a reference app. The focus for us is on the like orchestration component and to make it better so that we can power any number of copilots and like any number of agents or any number of like AI powered apps.
Of
But it
course,
is
of
very
course.
cool. It's called
Yeah, it
Spotlight,
is.
and
Yeah,
it works well. And some of our customers, are using it. It is also like an extreme talk about competition is where most of the competition has been focusing because like the excitement around AI. Um, but yeah, that's
yeah.
the story behind that.
I think it can help also in adoption of well, I mean, if you're going to drive an LLM that is able to, with language input, even voice, to build the workflow for you, then customers won't need that much guidance of like, hey, look at what you could build, or look at what, as a reference app, right, like with the Copilot. But before that, it can boost adoption a lot, right? Like, hey, this is an example of what you could build. This is like, and it can get people to spark ideas. So now, apart from Scalestack, let's talk about your go-to-market strategy. How are you growing the company? I know you started a podcast recently. I think there's like 5 episodes or something,
Four,
right?
four.
Four.
Like we are recording the fifth and the sixth as we speak. For now, like the cadence is once a month. We will increase it over time, but also based on what people think and they like. It's called Revenue Engine Masters. We've had like fantastic guests so far. The idea there overall, the idea is that we are interested in building a community for RevOps leaders that, like, we talk to larger companies that can tell us what they're seeing and, how they're trying to solve like the go-to-market problems. But like our go-to-market strategy is like on one end, we want to complement what like other competitors are doing to elevate the problem and the hotness of like the need of solving that problem. And so we want to talk about this a lot more. And so that's why, not only because probably I'm Italian, I like to talk a lot. And so that's part of my natural instinct. But having said that, it's also part of our strategy too. We want to elevate the conversation about all of these topics because I think that like people are really realizing now that these problems needs to be solved and we have the right platform to solve it. So I would say on one end is talk about this more on LinkedIn and in other channels. On the other end, like it's being like more in touch with customers wherever they are, and so like events, I'm going to present like a SaaStr and an SBI conference. SBI is like a RevOps leader in the market, like consulting leader, and so we're going to talk to some of their like customers. I'm going to attend SaaS Talk in Dublin in October. So being there, like where our customers are, is going to be very important. Direct sales, obviously, like it's one motion that we power with Scalestack. And so that's another motion that we do. And then we want to build an ecosystem that like for us is different because, I mean, we just signed a partnership with a company called Carabinier Group, which is another RevOps consulting. They target like larger enterprises. So any like company that helps larger companies with their CRM or setting up, all of the infrastructure, could be interested in working with us for the data side on behalf of their customers. And then we have an advocate program, which is for sales RevOps leaders that know other sales or RevOps leaders, and they can recommend us to companies that they admire. That advocate program is available so that they can get compensated in either cash or even RSAs of like Scalestack if those deals convert. So it's a number of things that we're doing. Everybody's rowing in the same direction at the company. We're still like, about 20 people size that can be handled. And so we're all like rowing the same direction to make sure that as many people as possible are aware of what we're doing for what type of customers, because that's important. That's the other side. If your customers are willing to talk about you, and luckily they are, that's another like great motion in our go-to-market. We have had like
Awesome.
a number of high profile case studies with MongoDB, Typeform is another customer, and more like to come. But yeah, those are a little bit like examples of what we're doing go-to-market wise.
That's awesome. That's a pretty solid go-to-market. I think like the events, like not like buying a booth and badge scans or whatever, but understanding it from the point of view, like going where our customers are and being well spoken about this and elevating the conversation. That was a good way to put it, because I think this type of talk, like I think a lot of enterprise companies are not aware that they can get this done automatically, and it's a big shift that aligns perfectly with where B2B tech is going in terms of financials and just overall go-to-market efficiency. And it's just such a great, and also the partnering up with consultants or consulting firms targeting enterprise that help with CRM implementations and overall RevOps stuff. That's also, of course, like super on point. So yeah, really good stuff. I love that you started a podcast. It goes to show that you're in events and on LinkedIn. It goes to show that what we do makes sense as well. Like that's our job literally. So yeah, good stuff. If you want to mention, I had another question for you, like top workflows and use like a specific workflow that you were amazed by when, because of course part of the charm or amusement of building this type of product, a product of which it is what companies make of it. It also comes with the experience of seeing customers build something that you wouldn't think of when you build the product itself, right? So have you experienced that already? I'm assuming yes, and if so, what was that workflow? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you always and mostly learn from customers. Customers always provide like a clarity of thoughts because they know their problems for the most part. Maybe they don't know the solution, but like they have the right words to like express their like deeply felt pain points. And so the more you can listen to customers, the more you learn, and then trying to solve those pain points is always like for me the most fun part. I mean, I would say we have made some examples, but like I would say, for instance, like the TAM workflow that we deployed for one of our largest customers was super interesting. So like, hey, how can we define TAM not only across the board for all of our accounts, but in the specific account? And so the TAM calculation is the result of like many different attributes, and then like they come down to a dollar amount, but that dollar amount is many different attributes, data points that you collect from many different data sources and that you can synthesize in that TAM. And then like, the composition of the TAM in each territory and the ability to switch accounts, so to compose a better picture, so that maybe you distribute like a good book of business across the org, so that if you give all of your best accounts to one rep, is usually not the right strategy, right? So you want to distribute the TAM across the board. So that was an interesting workflow that we deployed for a few of our customers, and the first time that we did it was fantastic. Another more recent workflow is an account discovery workflow. So in other words, like once we have enriched a lot of accounts for a customer, they came to us and they said, okay, now that we have done this and that motion is set and we have like automated refreshment and enrichment, we'd love to add more accounts that resemble our best accounts. And so we deployed like an account discovery workflow by ingesting lots of different data sources, including newsletters of several kinds. So like, actual newsletters that you get in your email, we send that, and the newsletter mention a company or news sites. And then like that company is like attracting the interest of our AI, and then like it gets enriched. And then we check if it exists in the CRM. And if it doesn't, it's a new account that has been discovered that matches like in certain like confidence level the ideal customer profile. And that's something that we are deploying as we speak for a number of customers, and that's super exciting.
Indeed, it is. that's yeah, super exciting stuff. I think everyone can learn a lot from those workflows, even if they're not going to get Scalestack because it's not a good fit for them. They're not enterprise, whatever. It's not needed. Talking about all these workflows that you mentioned, and the module, all this you can build yourself if you spend the time, right? If you're an individual contributor, you cannot afford a tool or whatever it may be, right? It's not a fit for you at your company, it won't be adopted. People using Clay, people using other tools, like listen and think, because this can spark a lot of ideas as well in terms of how to build the right list and play with data the best way possible. And I'm sure some coded out there might want to, try to automate some of those parts too. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I wanted to add also that this not only aligns, I think, with the efficiency era of SaaS, but also with the way outbound is changing and how we're shifting away from massive, lazy, not that relevant outbound campaigns to laser focused, way lower volume ABM type of outbound, signal based, etc. That is way more relevant. That focuses on the right time, the right message to the right person. And all this cannot be done, or it's way harder to get done without the
Yeah.
right tools. And I think Scalestack is part of that tech stack. So yeah, great stuff. Again, thank you for
Yeah. Thank you,
coming
Will.
over.
This was
I
fun.
encourage all of the listeners, check out your podcast and your LinkedIn, of course. And if they're going to SaaStr, look for you. You can go check out Scalestack and Elio's LinkedIn and whatnot. Is there anything else that you want to shout out or whatever?
No, this was fun, and thank you for like the opportunity to talk about all of the stuff that I'm very passionate about, and the entire company is passionate about. We are just wrapping up our seed round, and so I think also the other thing that like I want to mention, we talked about go to market and like what are our strategies. Part of all of this is also thanks to investors, and we're very proud of the investors that we have. I mean, it's easy to forget that a lot of these startups wouldn't exist without investors. So I want to be very appreciative of that, and we will announce soon like our seed. But yeah, so I'm thankful for like the opportunity to talk about all of this stuff, and I'll see all of you on LinkedIn, I guess.
Sure thing. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you
All right.
again next time.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch. Gracias a ti.
Ciao.
Bien. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening to the Founder Video Podcast with Will Martin, and we'll see you on the next episode.